In the quiet of their apartment that night, snow melting against the window panes, Ethan held Claire close. "We did it," he whispered. "We survived. On our terms." Claire leaned against him, her eyes reflecting the city lights. "Yes, but we can't forget. The cost, the pressure, the choices. They're part of who we are now. We survived, but the memory of what we endured will always linger." They embraced, aware that love had been tested to its limits, that morality and survival had clashed and reconciled, and that Manhattan, with its unyielding demands, would never relent. Their journey was far from over, but for now, they had reclaimed the agency stolen from them, navigating the thin line between survival, compromise, and integrity. The city sparkled outside, indifferent, relentless, and eternal, a reminder that life in Manhattan was a continuous negotiation, and that love, resilience, and moral courage were the only shields against the ceaseless pressures of fortune, power, and desire. And in that moment, Ethan and Claire understood the ultimate truth. Freedom was never given. It was earned through sacrifice, endurance, and the relentless assertion of one's own agency, even in a city that demanded everything and forgave nothing. Claire's hands trembled. "He's been watching everything, testing us, learning, measuring." Her voice was almost a whisper. "All this time, he's not just a threat. He's been orchestrating us like pieces on a chessboard." Ethan sank into the sofa, face buried in his hands. "And we thought we were making choices, that we had agency. Maybe we were just dancing to his tune all along." The revelation was intoxicating and suffocating. Months of careful navigation, sacrifices, and strategic compromise suddenly felt fragile, as if their lives had been subtly engineered to test their endurance, morality, and love. The next days were a whirlwind of paranoia, strategy, and confrontation. Every call, every email, every interaction became a potential trap, a test, or a manipulation. Julian's influence stretched beyond what they had imagined. Financial stability, professional recognition, and personal safety were all subtly tethered to his observation. Claire became hypervigilant in her work, dissecting every communication, reading subtext, anticipating implications. Ethan, grappling with rage and helplessness, scoured his professional contacts and personal networks for leverage or insight, desperate to reclaim a sense of control. Manhattan, once a landscape of opportunity, now felt like a maze of invisible threats, every turn potentially orchestrated by Julian's unseen hand. One night, the couple decided to confront the truth directly. They traveled to Julian's private club, a penthouse high above the city, shimmering with cold elegance. The tension was palpable. Julian greeted them with his trademark composure, but his eyes held a spark of amusement, as if he had anticipated this confrontation. "Claire, Ethan," he said smoothly, "you've been diligent, resourceful, and resilient, but tell me, what is the cost of that resilience? How much of yourself are you willing to give to endure?" Ethan stepped forward, voice shaking but determined. "We've given enough. We've survived tests, pressure, and threats, but no more. You won't control our lives, our love, or our choices anymore." Julian's smile was slow, deliberate. "Interesting, but consider this. Survival and opportunity always carry cost, and sometimes the cost is unseen until it's too late." The conversation escalated into a tense standoff, a battle of wits, power, and moral endurance. Julian proposed one final test, a hypothetical scenario that mirrored the events of the past months, a chance to secure financial freedom and professional success at the expense of personal compromise. The couple, now armed with the knowledge of Julian's manipulations, refused to play on his terms. "Not this time," Claire said firmly. "We decide the rules. We don't dance to your game." Ethan nodded, a surge of resolve fortifying him. "We've endured your tests, your pressure, and your shadows, but our lives, our choices, and our love, they're ours." Julian's expression shifted. A flicker of respect mingled with mild irritation, bold and foolish. Perhaps that is what distinguishes survivors from pawns. As they left the penthouse, the city sprawled beneath them in glittering chaos. For the first time, Ethan and Claire felt a tentative sense of liberation. Julian's tests, while pervasive and psychologically taxing, had inadvertently strengthened their bond, sharpened their agency, and clarified their values. The city's pressures remained, but they had reclaimed a measure of control, a hard-won assertion of moral and emotional independence. Yet the revelation left an uneasy aftertaste. Manhattan's indifference, Julian's influence, and the fragile nature of their victory created a tension that would linger. They had triumphed, yes, but the memory of compromise, the awareness of manipulation, and the shadow of past sacrifices ensured that calm was temporary. Survival was not final. Vigilance was eternal. The hours that followed were an intricate dance of negotiation, strategy, and emotional fortitude. Julian probed, suggested, and hinted, testing boundaries without explicit demands. Claire and Ethan responded with careful precision, asserting agency without compromising core values, navigating moral terrain that could have shattered lesser couples. Each decision, each subtle act of defiance or compliance, carried profound significance. As the night deepened, Ethan realized the stakes were higher than financial survival. This was a battle for identity, integrity, and love under pressure. He understood that yielding under coercion, even subtly, could erode the foundation of their relationship. Conversely, asserting agency could provoke Julian's scrutiny, forcing them to maintain vigilance at every moment. At a critical juncture, Julian leaned forward, voice low and deliberate. "Claire, there is an opportunity to secure everything, but it comes at a personal cost. Are you willing to accept it?" Claire paused, weighing the words, her heart racing. She glanced at Ethan, their connection anchoring her resolve. "I am willing," she said finally, "but only if we do it together, on terms we define. We survive, but we don't surrender our essence." Julian's expression remained unreadable. "Interesting. Very well. Let us see how your choices unfold." The meeting concluded, leaving the couple exhausted but empowered. They had navigated the ultimate test, balancing survival, morality, and love. Manhattan's lights shimmered below them, indifferent yet omnipresent, as if acknowledging their triumph while reminding them that vigilance and resilience were lifelong necessities. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and Claire implemented lessons learned. Every decision was now filtered through experience, morality, and strategic foresight. Opportunities were assessed not only for potential gain but for alignment with values and agency. The city, once an overwhelming adversary, became a terrain they could navigate with increasing confidence and unity. Their relationship, tempered by trials and compromise, grew stronger. Moments of intimacy became profound affirmations of love, resilience, and mutual understanding. They had faced the ultimate choice and emerged intact, not unscathed, but fortified, aware that survival and integrity could coexist if navigated with care and intention. Yet Manhattan remained merciless. The city's pulse was a constant reminder that challenges were never ending, that influence, power, and moral dilemmas could resurface unexpectedly. Julian, a ghostly presence, had shifted from threat to measured observation, his role now a catalyst for growth and resilience rather than pure coercion. Ethan and Claire, aware of the precarious balance they maintained, embraced the reality that life in Manhattan required constant negotiation, not just with others, but with themselves. Love, morality, and survival were intertwined, each decision shaping the narrative of their lives. And as they moved forward, hand in hand, they understood that their journey was far from over, yet fortified by lessons learned and the profound knowledge that, together, they could endure and prevail. Spring in Manhattan brought a deceptive calm. The streets glimmered under fresh rain, the air fragrant with melting snow, and the distant promise of warmer days. But for Ethan and Claire, the city's veneer of renewal concealed a storm of tension, secrets, and choices that had yet to reveal their ultimate cost. Months had passed since the ultimate choice with Julian. Claire's career flourished, her designs sought after by prestigious clients. Ethan's consulting work stabilized, giving them financial breathing room. Yet beneath the surface, the echoes of past compromises persisted, like invisible chains tightening with every new opportunity. Every subtle expectation, every whispered suggestion of influence. Julian, ever present in the periphery, had retreated into observation, his involvement now more psychological than direct, but the couple could feel him, like a shadow stretching across every contract, every invitation, every decision. Manhattan itself, indifferent and vast, mirrored that tension, a sprawling landscape where opportunity and danger were inseparable. One evening, Claire returned home from a long day at a design exhibition, her expression tired yet radiant. Ethan, pacing the apartment in his usual anxious rhythm, froze mid-step. "Claire, there's something I need to show you," he said, voice trembling slightly. She frowned. "What is it?" Ethan handed her an envelope, unmarked, thick, and heavy. Claire's brow furrowed as she opened it. Inside were photographs, messages, and evidence carefully compiled, a detailed account of Julian's manipulations, surveillance, and subtle coercion. But interspersed among the documentation were personal notes, letters that revealed Julian's true interest, not only in Claire's career but in their personal vulnerabilities, in Ethan's pride, in the fractures that threatened their love. Manhattan in late winter was merciless. The city streets gleamed under layers of slush and ice, reflecting neon signs like fractured dreams scattered on asphalt. The air was sharp, biting at exposed skin, and the persistent hum of traffic seemed almost accusatory, as if the city itself whispered reminders of the countless debts, compromises, and choices that defined the lives of its inhabitants. For Ethan and Claire, the city had become more than a backdrop. It was an omnipresent force, a relentless adversary, and a mirror reflecting their fears and desires. Despite weeks of cautious progress, a new challenge loomed, one that would test not only their survival instincts, but the very fabric of their love. The ultimatum arrived in an unassuming envelope, slipped under the door of their apartment. Its contents were precise, chilling in their clarity. Julian requested a private meeting. One night, a significant sum would be offered, more than enough to secure Claire's career, Ethan's financial stability, and a semblance of freedom, but at an intangible cost. The terms were unspoken but understood. Ethan's chest tightened as he read the words aloud, each syllable tasting like ash. "We've survived so much already," Claire murmured, voice tinged with both fear and resolve. "But this is different. It's not just money. It's a test, a choice, and it's ours to make." Ethan's hands shook as he crumpled the letter. I can't let this happen again. I can't watch you compromise yourself for my sake. We've endured, but how much more can we bear?" Claire's eyes glistened. "This is more than endurance. It's strategy, survival, and assertion of agency. If we navigate this carefully, we might emerge not just intact, but stronger. We decide the rules, this time, Ethan, not Julian." The days leading up to the meeting were a relentless storm of preparation, contemplation, and tension. Ethan and Claire rehearsed every possible scenario, dissecting Julian's motivations, his subtle psychological manipulations, and the stakes of each potential choice. Manhattan itself seemed to intensify the pressure. Sirens screamed, footsteps echoed through wet alleyways, and skyscrapers loomed like judgmental sentinels. Every decision carried weight beyond immediate comprehension. Ethan's anxiety mounted. Nights were sleepless, filled with imagined confrontations, fears of betrayal, and visions of loss. He questioned his own capacity for resilience, wondering if he could endure the emotional toll once more without fracturing under the strain. Claire, though outwardly composed, carried a quiet storm of her own. She oscillated between determination and apprehension, grappling with the moral implications of her choices and the unspoken consequences that might follow. Her love for Ethan was steadfast, yet she recognized the delicate balance between survival and integrity, between strategy and sacrifice. The night of the meeting arrived, a winter storm blanketing Manhattan in a silvery haze. The streets sparkled under neon reflections, umbrellas bobbing like a sea of muted colors against the relentless drizzle. Claire and Ethan entered Julian's penthouse suite, a space of cold elegance, high ceilings, and panoramic views of the city that never slept. The atmosphere was suffused with tension, the faint scent of expensive perfume and polished wood permeating the air. Julian greeted them with his characteristic calm, eyes observing, calculating, and weighing each subtle gesture. "Claire, Ethan," he said smoothly, "I understand the pressures you've faced, and I respect your resilience. But tonight, there are choices to be made, choices that will define not just your survival, but your future." The couple exchanged a glance, a silent affirmation of unity. Ethan's hand brushed Claire's, grounding them both amidst the psychological storm. Julian's proposition was both precise and insidious. He offered a substantial sum, guaranteed security and opportunity, but implied a price that was measured not only in moral compromise but in subtle psychological surrender. The couple listened in silence, analyzing the implications of each word, each pause, each measured gesture. Ethan felt his chest tighten. "So, it's a test, not just for her, but for both of us." Julian's smile was faint, enigmatic. "Precisely. Choices define the individual. How one navigates temptation, pressure, and opportunity reveals the essence of character." Claire's eyes met Ethan's. "We've been tested before, but now, we define the rules. We decide how far we go, and how we protect ourselves and each other, together. Claire shook her head slightly, voice tinged with exhaustion. Handled it, maybe, but every smile, every nod, it feels like survival by compromise. We're walking a tightrope, Ethan, and one misstep could undo everything. Ethan took her hand, holding it tightly. Then we walk it together. That's all I know how to do. The psychological strain intensified when Claire was presented with an opportunity that was simultaneously irresistible and morally compromising. A lucrative collaboration, directly connected to Julian's network, promised financial security and career advancement, but acceptance would require her to participate in an event with Julian, one designed to test her loyalty and endurance, a night that could subtly, but indelibly, challenge their moral boundaries. They debated the decision for hours, pacing their apartment, speaking in hushed tones over the city's ambient hum. I can't risk it, Ethan said finally, voice low and urgent. I can't watch you being manipulated again. I won't survive it emotionally. Claire stopped, eyes intense, hands on his shoulders. Ethan, listen, this is not just about survival. It's about agency. We've already endured compromise, yes, but now we have a chance to reclaim power, to navigate the system on our terms. We can choose how to respond, how to act. It's our moment. The night of the event arrived. An opulent private club perched atop one of Manhattan's tallest towers. The city sprawled beneath them, glittering like a constellation of ambition and desire. Julian was there, as ever, calm and calculating, his presence a silent reminder of past decisions and the stakes that remained throughout the evening. Subtle psychological games unfolded, conversations carried hidden implications, invitations implied moral tests, observers scrutinized reactions, gauging resilience and alignment with unseen expectations. Ethan and Claire moved as a unit, reading each gesture, each phrase, anticipating and responding in real time. At one point, Julian approached, his expression inscrutable. Claire, he said smoothly, your work is impressive, but tell me, how do you navigate temptation? How do you measure your loyalty? Claire met his gaze steadily, heart pounding. I navigate it by choice, she said calmly, by understanding my boundaries, and by ensuring that my decisions reflect who I am, not what others expect. Julian's lips curved into a faint, unreadable smile. Interesting, very interesting. He moved away, leaving a charged silence in his wake. Ethan, observing the interaction, felt a mixture of fear, pride, and relief. He squeezed Claire's hand, a silent affirmation of unity and defiance. In the following days, the couple reflected on the experience. The city, indifferent and sprawling, continued its relentless pulse. Yet Ethan and Claire sensed a shift. They had endured, yes, but more importantly, they had exercised agency. They had faced tests designed to exploit fear, compromise, and guilt, and emerged intact, stronger, and more united. The realization was profound. Survival had been only the beginning. True mastery of life in Manhattan required psychological resilience, moral clarity, and the courage to navigate compromise without surrendering oneself entirely. Julian, though still an influential presence, had inadvertently taught them a critical lesson. Power lay not only in wealth, but in the ability to choose how to respond, how to endure, and how to maintain integrity under pressure. As winter deepened, Ethan and Claire found a rhythm. Walks in Central Park became opportunities for reflection. Cafes and quiet streets offered brief reprieves from the city's scrutiny. Each day, they practiced small acts of agency, asserting control over decisions, navigating moral and professional challenges, and reinforcing the bond that had been tested, fractured, and ultimately strengthened by shared adversity. Their love, though scarred by past compromise, had emerged resilient. Moments of intimacy were no longer tinged solely with the memory of sacrifice. They were celebrations of endurance, trust, and the shared understanding that Manhattan's pressures could not erode the core of their relationship. The night of the gala arrived, a swirl of opulence, tailored suits, and glittering gowns. Manhattan's elite moved with practiced grace, their conversations a delicate dance of influence, ambition, and subtle threat. Ethan and Claire navigated the crowd with careful precision, aware of eyes that measured, judged, and anticipated missteps. Julian was present, a calm force amidst the storm, observing without overt interference, his presence a psychological weight that tested every fiber of their composure. Throughout the evening, subtle interactions reminded them of the high stakes. Compliments from influential figures carried expectations, invitations to exclusive circles required careful compliance, and whispers of past choices hovered like invisible specters. Each moment demanded vigilance, adaptability, and moral awareness. Yet Ethan and Claire emerged intact, their unity proving stronger than external pressures. In a quiet moment overlooking the skyline from the Gallus terrace, Ethan spoke softly. "We survived the night, the city, and Julian's shadow. But this is another test, another level of pressure." Claire leaned into him, eyes reflecting the city lights. "Yes, but we've learned something. We can endure. We can navigate the pressures, and we do it together. That's what matters." As Manhattan glittered beneath them, indifferent yet omnipresent, they understood that survival was no longer the sole objective. Love, resilience, and agency had become equally vital. The city, with all its complexity and danger, had become a proving ground, and they had proven, not only to Julian, but to themselves, that they could endure and prevail. Winter in Manhattan was a city of contrasts. Snow dusted the edges of skyscrapers, reflecting neon signs that cut through the dim gray skies. The streets, slick with ice and hurried footsteps, carried an energy that was both intoxicating and unforgiving. For Ethan and Claire, each day was an intricate balance between survival and self-preservation, love and compromise, hope and fear. The weeks following the gala tested the couple in ways they had not anticipated. Claire's professional success began to flourish. Her designs were gaining recognition, small commissions multiplying into larger contracts, and subtle attention from Manhattan's elite had begun to shift in her favor. But with opportunity came pressure. Every email, every phone call, every invitation carried hidden strings, implicit demands, and reminders of Julian's looming presence. Ethan noticed the subtle tension growing within Claire. Though she appeared confident and composed in public, behind closed doors, she would often retreat into quiet contemplation, her fingers brushing against her lips, eyes distant. He recognized the signs, the mental calculus of every interaction, the constant weighing of choices, the lingering burden of past compromise. One evening, as snow fell silently outside their apartment, Ethan confronted the reality that had been creeping into their lives. "Claire, I see it, the way you move through your work, the way you handle every client. It's like you're navigating a battlefield." Claire looked up, eyes tired but resolute. "I am navigating a battlefield. Manhattan isn't forgiving, Ethan. Not for talent alone, not for love alone. We have to make choices, calculate risks, and sometimes compromise. That's the reality." Ethan sank into the chair across from her, hands trembling slightly. "I know, but every decision feels like a test I can't pass. And Julian, his shadow is everywhere. I can't stop imagining what he expects, what he might do next." The next days brought that reality into sharper focus. Julian, seemingly distant yet omnipresent, began to make subtle interventions in Claire's career. Invitations to exclusive events were no longer neutral. They were tests, psychological challenges designed to gauge resilience, morality, and allegiance. Each encounter with his network forced Claire and Ethan to weigh survival against integrity, opportunity against conscience. At a high-profile design showcase, Claire faced one of these tests. A client, a well-known patron connected to Julian, scrutinized her every word and gesture, probing for weaknesses, for hints of her loyalty, for traces of moral compromise. Claire, poised and composed, navigated the interaction with precision. But inside, a storm raged. Ethan, watching from across the room, felt his chest tighten, the old jealousy and helplessness resurfacing. After the event, they walked through the city streets, now glittering with ice and neon reflections. The silence between them was heavy. "You handled that well," Ethan said quietly, breaking the tension. The workdays were relentless. Claire's design projects required meticulous attention to detail. Client meetings, and travel across Manhattan's chaotic streets. Each interaction was an exercise in professionalism, yet the lingering memory of compromise shadowed her confidence. Some clients were perceptive, subtle, in their assessment of her character. Others were overtly probing, testing boundaries, measuring loyalty and ambition in ways that felt invasive and exhausting. Ethan's consulting work, while steady, was equally demanding. He found himself walking a tightrope between assertiveness and humility, between competence and subservience. Every conversation felt like a calculated negotiation. every decision weighted by the potential ripple effects of past compromises. Julian's presence, though not physical, was a psychological force, a ghostly hand guiding, observing, and subtly manipulating. Despite the pressure, Ethan and Claire clung to one another. Their moments of intimacy, though fraught with unspoken tension, were acts of defiance against the city and the shadow of Julian. Small gestures, brushing fingers over the kitchen counter, lingering glances during traffic jams, whispered "I love you" in the quiet of their bedroom, became lifelines, reminders that they were not alone in navigating this intricate web of survival. Yet the strain was undeniable. Minor disagreements exploded into fierce arguments, fueled by months of suppressed emotion and fear. Ethan, consumed by guilt and jealousy, often lashed out at situations he could not control. Claire, while steadfast in her resolve, sometimes responded with frustration, the emotional residue of compromise manifesting as impatience. One particularly tense evening, after a long day of client presentations and boardroom negotiations, the argument reached a crescendo. Ethan's voice, usually measured and calm, cracked under pressure. I can't keep pretending this is okay," he shouted, hands gripping the edge of the dining table. "Every day I see you navigating this city, and I feel helpless. I feel like I failed you, like I failed us." Claire stepped closer, eyes unwavering, voice calm but edged with intensity. "Ethan, listen, I made a choice for us, yes, but we survived together. We can't let fear and guilt destroy what we've built. We have to be stronger than the circumstances." The tension hung in the air. The room silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the city's distant pulse outside. They stared at each other, the weight of unspoken truths pressing down. Finally, Ethan exhaled, a mixture of relief and resignation. "You're right, as always," he said softly. "But it's not easy. Not easy at all." The following days were a delicate balance. Claire immersed herself in a high-stakes design project for a client known for both opportunity and ruthlessness. The work required travel to exclusive Manhattan districts, late nights in studios, and navigation of social events that doubled as psychological minefields. Each interaction reminded her that freedom in the city was conditional, that every opportunity could carry a hidden cost. Ethan supported her quietly, managing his consulting clients while maintaining vigilance over their home life. He had begun to notice subtle patterns, small gestures from clients, hints in emails, coded phrases that suggested the lingering influence of Julian's network. The awareness was exhausting, but it also sharpened their senses, forcing them to adapt, to strategize, and to endure. Amidst the chaos, moments of tenderness persisted. A quiet breakfast at a corner cafe, a walk through Central Park beneath bare winter branches, a shared laugh over a minor mishap at a client presentation. These fleeting moments became sacred. They were reminders of the humanity that survived despite compromise, pressure, and fear. The psychological tension peaked when Claire received an unexpected invitation to an exclusive design gala, an event directly tied to Julian's social circle. The invitation was formal, elegant, but carried implicit demands: compliance, appearance, and subtle recognition of his influence. The couple debated the decision late into the night. "We can't ignore this," Claire said, voice measured. "It's an opportunity for my career. But it's Julian, and he'll test us, even subtly. We have to be prepared." Ethan nodded, conflicted. "I know, but the thought of you there, I can't stop imagining what he might expect, what he might say. I don't know if I can bear it." Claire reached for his hand, her fingers entwining with his. "We face it together. That's the only way we'll survive, Ethan, together. No matter what he does, no matter the pressure." One particularly rainy evening, as they returned from a minor victory in Claire's professional world, a successful presentation that secured a small contract, Ethan stopped in the doorway of their apartment, rain dripping from his coat. "Claire, we've survived so much, but I feel like the weight never lifts. It's always there, like a shadow over every choice we make." Claire placed her hand on his arm, squeezing gently. "I know, I feel it too. But maybe surviving isn't enough anymore. Maybe we need to learn how to live despite the shadow, to reclaim our agency." Ethan sighed, a mixture of relief and despair. "Live, yes, but how? The city doesn't forgive. Julian doesn't forget. And I don't know if I can endure more tests like that night." She stepped closer, eyes unwavering. "We don't have to endure alone. That night, that choice, it was ours. And from now on, we decide how to navigate the city, the opportunities, and the dangers, together." The rain outside intensified, tapping against the windows like a drumbeat of fate. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. The night of sacrifice had ended, the debts paid, but a new journey was beginning, one of deliberate survival, of moral negotiation, and of reclaiming love amidst the ceaseless pressures of Manhattan. Over the subsequent weeks, the couple adopted new routines. Mornings were for planning, afternoons for work, evenings for reflection. They took to walking in the park at dusk, seeking solace in the muted light and the rhythm of their footsteps. At cafes, they met clients carefully, analyzing intentions and subtext with a newfound acuity. Julian, though absent in person, remained a ghostly presence in their lives. The shadow of the night, the implicit debt of choice, lingered in every interaction that could influence Claire's career or Ethan's consulting work. Whispers of opportunity carried the hidden weight of expectation. Invitations to social events came with strings. Offers of collaboration were subtle tests. Each decision became a calculation. Each interaction a negotiation not only with others, but with themselves, with their values, their fears, and their love. And so, Manhattan continued to hum, indifferent to the trials of a couple who had glimpsed the edge of moral compromise and lived. Ethan and Claire, bound by love, guilt, and survival, learned the delicate art of navigating shadows, seizing opportunity without surrendering agency, and enduring together. They discovered that the night of sacrifice was not the end, but the beginning of a deeper, more complex dance, one of power, choice, and the relentless pursuit of a life reclaimed from compromise. Manhattan had a way of testing its inhabitants in ways no other city could. The streets pulsed with ceaseless energy, the lights reflecting off rain-slicked asphalt like shards of broken dreams. For Ethan and Claire, the city had become both a proving ground and a prison, demanding vigilance, resilience, and sometimes sacrifice beyond imagination. The weeks following their narrow survival had taught them one undeniable truth. Love alone was not enough to navigate a world so ruthlessly indifferent. The first morning of Part 3 dawned cold and gray, the kind of morning that made the sky seem as heavy as the worries pressing on their minds. Ethan rose early, the weight of responsibility settling into his chest like a leaden vest. Bills had been paid, debts cleared, but the intangible cost of Claire's choice still lingered, as palpable as the chill that seeped through their apartment windows. Claire joined him shortly after, hair damp from the drizzle outside, eyes shadowed with fatigue and lingering unease. Her gaze met his briefly, a silent acknowledgement of the shared burden they carried. Words were unnecessary. The city itself seemed to whisper reminders of the fragile compromise they had made. Breakfast was quiet, the clinking of utensils against porcelain echoing in the otherwise silent apartment. Ethan tried to focus on plans for the day, client calls, scheduling, project timelines, yet every thought returned to that night, to Julian's shadow hovering over every decision they had made. "We can't let it define us," Claire said finally, her voice low but firm. "That night, it's behind us, but our choices, our work, our lives, they're ahead. We have to focus on that." Ethan nodded, but the knot in his chest refused to loosen. "I know," he murmured, "but every email, every call, every client, I feel like I'm under a microscope, like one misstep could undo everything." Days turned into weeks, and while the immediate threat of eviction and debt had dissipated, the emotional aftermath lingered. Claire threw herself into her work, securing a few small design projects, each one a step toward financial stability. Yet every client meeting, every email, carried an undercurrent of vigilance, a reminder that the night with Julian, though over, would not be forgotten by the currents of Manhattan's elite. Ethan returned to his consulting work, but the weight of inadequacy had settled deeply into his chest. Every interaction, every client call, every minor professional setback reminded him that he had been unable to protect Claire from compromise. The city's pulse, once invigorating, now seemed a constant assault. Skyscrapers looming like judgmental sentinels, streets whispering of risks he could not always foresee or control. The couple's relationship bore the strain in subtle but persistent ways. Shared meals were quiet affairs, the conversation meandering around safe topics while both danced delicately around the unspoken. Moments of intimacy were fleeting, sometimes mechanical, as though they were actors performing a ritual of closeness to reassure themselves and the world that love had survived. At night, Ethan would pace their small apartment, hands running through his hair, heart racing. He replayed the night Claire spent with Julian in his mind, imagining scenarios, outcomes, and betrayals. The jealousy, anger, and fear threatened to overwhelm him, yet he knew he could not direct that fury at Claire. She had chosen to act for both their survival. The conflict within him, love versus pride, gratitude versus resentment, was an invisible but relentless storm. Claire, aware of Ethan's struggle, wrestled with her own guilt. She had acted out of love, out of a desire to protect them both from ruin, yet the cost weighed heavily. Moments of intimacy with Ethan were now tinged with the memory of compromise, and she feared the emotional distance that might grow between them if the memory lingered too long. At night, she would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if love could truly endure when tested so profoundly by circumstance and moral sacrifice. In public, they attempted to present the appearance of normalcy. Walks through Central Park, coffee shops, and the streets of Manhattan were exercises in performance. Polite smiles, casual conversation, subtle glances that reassured them of each other's presence. But beneath the veneer, both felt the latent tension, an unspoken acknowledgement of the costs they had paid. The city, meanwhile, remained indifferent, a sprawling entity that consumed the lives of its inhabitants without pause. Opportunities arose, but each carried potential risk. Each required a calculation of morality, survival, and compromise. Claire's career showed signs of promise. Small design clients were eager to work with her, her style lauded for its creativity and sensitivity. But with each success came subtle pressures. Clients who hinted at expectations beyond professional work, invitations to exclusive events that required careful navigation, and the ever-present shadow of Julian's influence. Ethan, too, found himself navigating complex professional landscapes, where every decision could carry unseen consequences. His consulting work brought him into contact with individuals who seemed unusually interested in his and Claire's personal lives, probing subtly, testing boundaries, assessing resilience. Each encounter reminded him that survival in Manhattan was more than financial. It demanded constant vigilance, adaptability, and moral clarity. Amidst these pressures, the couple began to notice changes in each other. Ethan's protective instincts remained strong, yet he had begun to internalize guilt and inadequacy, moments of doubt creeping into interactions that previously had been seamless. Claire, while outwardly composed, displayed flashes of anxiety, hesitation, and a cautious approach to opportunities that had previously been seized with confidence. Their arguments became less frequent but more intense. Small disagreements, where to dine, how to budget, which clients to pursue, could ignite profound conflicts, fueled by the undercurrents of fear, pride, and moral unease. Yet each argument, though painful, revealed the depth of their bond. They were tethered not by circumstance alone, but by the love and shared trauma that had defined the night of sacrifice and the weeks of aftermath. Ethan wanted to scream, to fight, to protect her at all costs. Yet, as he looked into her eyes filled with determination and fear, he understood the depth of the sacrifice she was willing to make. Survival had a price, and sometimes that price was unimaginable. By the time the sun rose over Manhattan, a decision had been made. Claire would meet Julian. Ethan would wait, heart-pounding, praying silently that this sacrifice would be enough. The city outside glimmered as if mocking them, a playground for the ruthless and indifferent, where love and morality were often secondary to survival. The night of the meeting was surreal. Claire, dressed elegantly in a gown that shimmered under the penthouse lights, entered Julian's world, a world of luxury, power, and subtle menace. Ethan stayed behind, pacing their apartment, imagining every possible outcome, his stomach tight with fear. Hours stretched like days. The rain continued to drum against the windows, each drop a reminder of the precarious line between survival and ruin. When Claire returned, pale but intact, they embraced, trembling. They had survived the ordeal, yet the emotional toll was immense. The city outside glittered with its false promises, indifferent to their suffering. And yet, in that fragile moment, they had each other, a tenuous anchor in the storm. Over the following weeks, Ethan and Claire attempted to rebuild normalcy. Debts were paid, small luxuries reintroduced, and the fragile rhythm of survival regained. But Manhattan's pulse was unrelenting. Every corner, every interaction, reminded them that their choices had consequences. Gossip, whispers, and veiled judgments followed Claire's professional life. Julian's shadow lingered, subtle but persistent, a reminder that freedom in this city was never absolute. Ethan struggled with feelings of inadequacy. His love for Claire remained steadfast, yet guilt and fear intertwined, creating a constant tension. Nights were restless, filled with whispered conversations, apologies, and fleeting moments of connection. They learned to communicate more openly, acknowledging the trauma, guilt, and love that entwined them. The morning after Claire's fateful night with Julian dawned gray and muted. Manhattan's usual cacophony was softened by a persistent drizzle, a quiet melancholy that mirrored Ethan's internal state. The streets, lined with gleaming towers and amber streetlights, seemed somehow heavier, as if the city itself sensed the invisible toll of what had just transpired. Ethan stood by the window, shoulders slumped, staring at the reflections of the skyscrapers on the wet streets. The city's usual promise of opportunity had transformed into an indifferent specter, a constant reminder of the deal they had just made, the price they had paid for survival. He could still feel Claire's absence from the night before, the distance between them that no embrace or whispered apology could bridge. Claire entered the apartment quietly, her eyes shadowed by exhaustion and lingering dread. She had survived the night physically unharmed, yet her presence carried a weight Ethan could not alleviate. She moved with practiced grace, unpacking groceries from their earlier shopping trip, but her hands trembled slightly, betraying the turmoil beneath her composed exterior. "Morning," Ethan muttered, his voice hoarse from sleeplessness and anxiety. Claire nodded, not meeting his eyes. "Morning," she replied softly. She paused, then added, almost to herself, "We made it through, didn't we?" Ethan turned from the window, jaw tight. "Yes, we made it through, but I can't stop thinking about what it cost us, what it will always cost us." The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of traffic. For the first time, the weight of survival pressed down upon them fully. They had traded dignity, peace of mind, and the sanctity of their love for financial reprieve. Yet, paradoxically, that reprieve felt fragile, transient, as if the city would demand repayment not in money, but in something far more personal and profound. Manhattan at twilight was a kaleidoscope of color and sound. The city's towers gleamed with glass and steel, reflecting the amber glow of streetlights, neon signs, and the fading sun. Horns honked endlessly, tires hissed on wet asphalt, and the murmur of thousands of footsteps created a constant, unyielding rhythm. To outsiders, the city was an emblem of possibility, a playground for those who dared. But for Ethan and Claire, it was a cage, a constant reminder that survival here required more than ambition. It demanded cunning, sacrifice, and the courage to face the impossible. Ethan leaned against the window of their modest Upper East Side apartment, staring at the skyline. He could see Central Park stretching into the distance, the trees dark and shivering beneath the evening sky. The lights of Fifth Avenue reflected off the rain-slicked streets, creating a dazzling mosaic of wealth and desire. And yet, beneath this beauty, a gnawing dread settled in his chest. Bills were stacked neatly on the counter, a cruel reminder of what he couldn't pay. The rent was overdue, utilities teetered on cutoff, and the bank had called 3 times that day. Claire entered the room, slipping off her coat. Her hair was damp from the sudden drizzle outside, and her eyes carried a mixture of exhaustion and determination. She moved to the kitchen, unpacking groceries with precise, almost mechanical motions. "Ethan, we need to talk," she said softly, not turning to face him. He followed her gaze to the countertop, where invoices and late notices lay like accusations. "I know," he said, voice tight. "I've been trying to figure it out. There's just not enough. I don't know what else we can do." Claire's hands trembled slightly as she stacked cans and vegetables. "I've been thinking we might need outside help, someone who can give us a way out." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Outside help? What do you mean?" She hesitated, swallowing hard. "Julian, the billionaire at the gallery, he offered a solution. It's a lot of money, enough to clear all our debts, enough to start over, but," her voice cracked, "he wants me for one night." Ethan froze. The words hung in the air like jagged glass, cutting through the warmth of the apartment and piercing the fragile sense of security they'd managed to maintain. Anger, disbelief, fear, and love collided violently within him. "He wants you?" he asked, barely able to form the words. Claire nodded, tears glistening. "It's the only way, Ethan. If we refuse, we lose everything, every single thing we've worked for, every chance at survival." The city outside continued its relentless hum, indifferent to their suffering. Rain pattered against the windows, a cruel metronome marking each heartbeat, each agonizing second of indecision. Ethan sank into a chair, running his hands through his hair. His mind raced, pride screamed against the injustice, morality flared like fire, yet logic whispered a merciless truth. They had no other choice. The night was a blur of argument, tears, and whispered confessions. They paced their apartment, the neon glow slicing through the blinds, illuminating Claire's tear-streaked face and Ethan's clenched fists. Words were exchanged, each syllable heavy with fear, guilt, and love. "I can't let you do this," Ethan said, voice breaking. "There has to be another way. There has to be." Claire shook her head. "There isn't. Not anymore. Julian, he's the only one who can save us. He's the only way we can survive this city, this life, this us."